My story really started before it began in a lot of ways. I was born to two people who really shouldn't have been parents. My mom was going to Ohio State at the time and my dad was going to Duke. So in a lot of ways, I was an inconvenience for the lives that they wanted to live. My dad continued to go to school and so did my mom, but she kept me and I lived with her growing up. So growing up, because, my mom didn't really know how to be a mom, I spent a lot of my time alone. She got married when I was about 6. The guy that she was married to, they had met at a bar, and, it was just a college thing. You go out, you party, and don't really care about too much else. So really that kind of set the stage for what the rest of my life was going to be, and I didn't really know it at the time. One of my first memories was it was the first time I ever had a sleepover. One of my friends from down the road. We were sleeping in the living room, and my stepdad came home, and he was trashed, and he steps over us, stumbles over us, whatever. Goes in the back room and is just screaming at my mom about how she's worthless and disgusting and all that kind of stuff, which was normal for me, but that was, I guess, the first glimpse of my life not being normal compared to everybody else's. So that went on for a couple years. They ended up getting divorced when I was about 10 years old. My little sister, my mom, and I moved to Mogador, where I would spend most of my teenage years. And something was definitely different. My mom's drinking got a little bit more out of hand. She would pick us up from the babysitters, and we would run through the drive-thru. She'd get a 30-pack of beer. She'd get us McDonald's and take us home. She'd drink till she passed out. I would take care of my sister and make sure she got a shower and stuff like that, and go to bed. And that was really my life for a while. When I was about 11 years old, my grandma passed away, and that's, I think, really what sparked my mom's downward spiral in a lot of ways. She wasn't working as much as she used to. She wasn't putting herself into her work, because where she wasn't a great parent, she was still a teacher and still did her job. But with that, there's a big difference at home. She was always mad at us. She was always angry with us, and my sister was lucky enough to be able to go to her dad's house, but I was always at my house. So going into middle school, I kind of started to understand what my life was in some ways. My friends would come over, and my house was a house with no rules because my mom would be passed out, so we could run the town and do whatever we wanted. So my place was the place to go. But then my friends started, making fun of me for that. Like, oh, your mom's gonna be passed out again. Your mom's gonna be drunk on the couch. She's this and she's that, whatever it was. And I started to get really embarrassed of that. So that's when I really started to get angry with her. And it was about the same time that I really realized my dad wasn't who I thought he was. Growing up, he was this accomplished guy who was a football star in high school, and he went to Duke University. He was just my hero. But at this time, I really realized he wasn't a dad. I never had a father figure growing up. I was just my stepdad left and my dad wasn't around. So into middle school, that's kind of when I started to try to fill voids in my life. Middle school was the first time that I ever tried getting high. My mom was passed out in the basement, and me and a couple of my friends got high up in my bedroom. And she never said anything about it. So, I started stealing alcohol from her. I started getting beer from some of the kids in high school, and that was kind of, I guess, distracting in some ways. It was a way for me to just kind of have fun and forget about the pain I was feeling. It kind of followed me into high school. My freshman year, I'd calmed down a little bit because I was running track, so that was something I was really proud of and something I was excited to do. So that whole year, I'm kind of living on the fence of, I'm trying to get attention from these guys, or, I'm not drinking or anything as much, and I don't really know what sparked it in me, but going into my sophomore year, things with my mom and I got really, really bad. She was, she was dating this guy who was 8 years older than I was. It was a really bad relationship. They would go out to the bars. I'd be at home alone all the time. My 16th birthday, she picked up and decided to go out of town for the weekend, left me $100, and I spent 8 hours in my room just getting high. I passed out at some party the next night and woke up and really started questioning who I was, but I saw that I had fun in that moment. So that was what I was going to continue to do to try to numb the pain. I was hanging out with some of the seniors as a sophomore, and that's all they did was they get drunk before football games and basketball games and afterwards, and that was fun, and there was no real connections. There was no real friendships there. I pushed out a lot of the friends that I had grown up with, the people that cared about me, that had been through all the stuff that I had gone through up to that point. They were always there for me, but I was very standoffish with them because I felt like they didn't want anything to do with me because of what I was doing. This is around the same time that I kind of got to a point, about 16, I had no hope. Honestly, I didn't see any reason to be alive. My parents didn't love me. They didn't want anything to do with me. Pushed all my friends away. I put myself in situations with, drinking or getting high or different guys and stuff like that, that I just left feeling very empty, feeling very just broken in a lot of ways. And I didn't know what was going to change that. The people that I was friends with, they started to kind of ask me questions like, hey, what's going on? And, with your mom, I know that things are pretty bad right now. And they started inviting me to church. And it was months would go by, and I would say, no, these people, they don't want anything to do with me. The only idea of God that I had up until this point was my mom would take us to church during one of her manic phases growing up. And I didn't know what it was all about, so I was annoyed by the fact that I'd get up early and dress nice on a Sunday and then never go back. Even if a part of me enjoyed going to that church growing up, like there was no consistency. So I just kind of wrote it off. My dad was an atheist, so I kind of went along with that. And with these friends inviting me, I kind of thought it was funny. They were telling me how much fun they had at gladiator games and how all the people down in this youth group that they were going to were just awesome and helping them through a lot of the things that they were struggling with that I was too selfish to even notice, to be completely honest. So things get really bad at home. Child services gets involved. My mom is completely negligent. She pushed me around a little bit. It wasn't anything serious, but it was enough to get child services involved. So my sister was taken out of the house. My mom was sent to rehab for the second time. It's the first time that I remembered. So it was then that I was like, you know what? Forget it. I'll just go to church this one time. You guys will leave me alone. That's one less thing on my plate that I have to worry about. So I went on Easter Sunday, 2011, and I was really shocked because only Easter or Christmas or anything like that I had experience with was, like I said, these random churches, the Catholic church, because my stepdad was Catholic. So I was just, the music was like stuff I heard on the radio, and the people were really nice. Even the people that I had never met, they were very welcoming and stuff like that. So I continued to come on Wednesday nights, and I knew about who this Jesus person was, but I didn't know why he mattered. I heard for the first time about salvation. I didn't know that you had to accept Jesus into your heart in order to be saved and go to heaven. I thought that maybe if I make better choices when I get older, then maybe I'll get into heaven. And it was really in Connect when Jay was preaching on Wednesday nights that I had finally understood that there is hope. The life that I'm living doesn't have to be a dead end if I don't want it to be. So going through these Wednesday nights, I would fight myself every week. My best friend at the time, Jordan, she would sit next to me and she would see that, what Jay was preaching about was getting to me, but I wouldn't let it get to me. I had a couple conversations in passing with Larry and Jay and just little stuff going on in my life, and seeing that it was very, very important to me to see that there was these men that weren't bad, these men that maybe wanted to invest into my life because of the hope that they had in theirs. So There was one Wednesday night, it was May 25th, 2011. We were down in Connect after Gladiator games, and Jay was preaching. His dad came into the doors and said, "Hey, just so everybody knows, there's a tornado that touched down over in Norton, and you guys need to go upstairs to the 112. So we're sitting in here, and I remember Jay saying something along the lines of, if you don't feel safe, you feel like you need to go home, go ahead. But I'm going to stay here, I'm going to talk about Jesus a little bit more. So I remember we were walking up to the 112, and I was thinking, like, man, what would happen? I've heard about salvation, I've heard about who Jesus is, but I've never accepted that. So walking up there was kind of when I realized, now's the time, Now's the time to really stop trying, doing things on your own and see that there's hope. There's hope in something more than this. So Jay gives an invitation up in the 112 that night, and that was the night that I finally looked up and ended up accepting Jesus. That was definitely a turning point in my life, but I didn't root myself in Christ. I didn't turn away from the things that I was doing. They tell you all about how you need to stop living the way of this world and live how God calls us to live, but I didn't fully grasp that because 2 weeks later my mom got out of rehab and she started drinking again that night. So I was angry, so I started drinking again that night. That whole summer I completely shut out my friends that were coming to church, the people at the church. I wanted nothing to do with any of that because I was really angry. So that whole summer I was either getting high or getting drunk every couple days. I mean, I knew that what I was doing was wrong, but I didn't really understand why I shouldn't be living this way. But one Sunday I woke up a little bit earlier than usual, and I remember walking from my car up to 5A to come into Connect that morning, and something was different. Something felt, I don't know, I'll never be able to explain it, but it was, walking in alone. My friends hadn't been asking me, but I knew that this time was different. I knew that for some reason this was going to stick this time. Funny enough, that morning was actually Mike and Carolyn's wedding, which was really cool because I had known of them, but I didn't really know them at the time. So after that Sunday morning, I started coming back to Connect on Wednesdays and Sunday mornings, and I remember Jay telling me about a Bible study that they were going to get started in a couple weeks called Life Hurts, God Heals, and that was really cool for me because there was this person that was in my life a year prior, and I kind of shut out, and he was telling me all about this more hope, if you will, about this study that really resonated with me because that was really where I was at. Life hurts and life sucks, but God is capable of healing. And I started going to that, and I started getting connected with Val and Michelle at that point. I remember it was a couple days after I got baptized, actually. We had a Sunday night Bible study, and I remember in passing talking to Michelle about some stuff, and she wanted to hear my story. So that night we're sitting on the front porch of Jay and Val's house, Val, Michelle, and I, and I'm sharing with them my story, which I didn't really realize at the time was my story, that God was capable of using it, because at the time I was really, really broken. I was really, really hurt, and I just remember sitting on the porch with them and just crying, and them praying with me, telling me that God's got a plan for all this. God, you're gonna understand one day what God's doing through this. It's not comfortable and it's not fun to go through this stuff right now, but one day you'll be able to look back and see that all the pain you're dealing with right now makes sense. And funny enough, after I really got plugged back into the church, my life kind of got really bad. That was the first summer that I ever had gone to Lift Camp. So I go to camp, and Tuesday morning I really kind of understood what salvation really meant to me and why it was so important to me, and why what Jesus did on the cross for me mattered so much. So it was that night that I ended up rededicating my life to Christ and choosing to put aside some of the stuff that I had done in the past, and know that God is in control. So we go to camp. I get back on Friday, and were moved out of my house. My mom had the house that we were living in foreclosed on, so we had, she had picked up and moved while I was gone. Life got really confusing at this point. I was trying to do things the right way. I'd really cut back on, drinking or getting high or trying to find attention from guys, but my circumstances got very messed up. We had people in and out of my house, day in and day out, people stealing from us, people fighting and, causing a bunch of problems and stuff like that, where I didn't feel safe. So there was a lot of nights that, 1, 2, 3 in the morning, I'd be calling up Jay or Val or Michelle or Larry and saying, I don't feel safe. I don't know what's going to happen here, but I know that I can't be here anymore. So there was countless nights that I would end up on one of their couches, and the next morning say, hey, thanks, I appreciate it, and then that was it. But for me, that was a big step in the fact that there were people that cared, people that didn't have to care, and people that they had no obligation to me, to be completely honest. They were leaders in the church and they were serving and all that, but that's all I saw it as, is these people were just doing a good deed. They didn't really actually care about me. So that was kind of something I was internally struggling with, between what was going on with my mom and how bad that was getting, and these people really showing me that they cared about me, but me not being able to really accept that. So continuing on through my senior year, like I said, I was cutting back, doing some of the stuff I was doing to hurt myself, and my mom ended up getting to a point where she would be threatening to kill herself weekly. There was one time specifically that I remember. It was really late one night. I got late from hanging out with some friends, and I trying to go to bed, and I can't sleep that night because the fighting's just a little bit worse than usual. And soon enough, there's an ambulance and some police cars outside, and that was a little different because usually, there's not an ambulance. If there's a police car, they're just there to calm things down, but I knew this time was a little bit different. So I remember going from my bedroom to the top of my stairs, and I remember looking down and seeing my uncle, who was he's a fire lieutenant over in Akron, and he had received a call, or he overheard a call through dispatch saying our address, and that there was a person threatening to kill themselves. And I remember starting to walk down the stairs and just asking, like, what's going on here, guys? Like, what's happening? And my uncle just telling me, get your stuff, you need to get out of here, you need to leave, it's not safe, go away. And I remember looking from the stairs down to my mom, and this was the first time she ever really expressed this to me, and I guess because of me. I remember her laying on the couch like I had seen for 8 years, almost passed out drunk, and I remember her looking up at me and telling me, like, I have no reason to be alive. I lost your sister. I have no friends. My family's pushed me away. In all reality, it was really her trying to do things on her own. That's a little bit of a different story, but and I remember asking her, like, am I not reason enough for you to be alive? And she was too wrapped up in herself, and her alcohol ran her entire life. She was on pills and all this different stuff. Like, that was her life. I wasn't her life. And that, where I was growing closer to God at this point, that really shook me, because that was really a moment when I realized, life with God's not going to always be the easiest, but I do have somebody to fall back on. So going forward from that, that just kind of became a trend, like I said. Always kind of in fear of people coming in and out, and God only knows what they're going to do. They're high, they're addicts, they're dealers, they're felons, I didn't know what these people were capable of. So I finally got to a point, my senior year was right after I graduated. My mom actually, so it was graduation weekend. She had gotten out of the hospital. She came to my graduation, and it was kind of crazy because, like, I'm walking out of graduation, and I see my mom, and a couple minutes later, I see my dad and my grandparents and my little sister, my aunt, and Jay and Val, and Michelle, and, like, all these people that show that they care about me and show that they love me and show that, you know, I am loved and accepted into something. And first person I saw was my mom, and that really shook me, and I think it shook her too, because that night she overdosed on heroin. She ended up in the hospital. She flatlined, and that was when I decided, this is it. I'm done. I can't be here anymore. So I gave her the ultimatum: you continue doing what you're doing, and I leave, or you stop doing what you're doing. We'll work on this relationship for the next 3 months before I go to college, and I'll stay. And basically it turned out to be, I'd rather have my friends, I'd rather do what I'm doing, so you can go. So the next day, Val showed up at my house and helped me move out over to my grandparents for that summer. So finally got out. Always kind of had in the back of my mind, like, is she okay? Is she going to do something? Is it going to be my fault? Because I was always carrying that burden. So going into my freshman year of college, I was kind of carrying that. In a lot of ways, I was still kind of living on the fence. And there was one time when I had a little bit too much to drink, and I ended up waking up after blacking out on a friend's couch and showing up to church the next morning. Probably hours later, I don't know if I was still drunk, I don't know if I was hungover, I don't know what it was, but that was a point where I realized I needed to stop. I remember having a conversation with Jay about Revelation 3 and God talking about us being lukewarm, and how if you're a lukewarm Christian, like, God wants to spit you out, you know, that makes God want to throw up. And for me, that was super convicting. So I decided that, you know, I'm going to stop doing things on my own, and I'm going to try to go God's way again. But I was still holding on to little bits and pieces of what I thought I could control. So I ended up applying for Lyft staff. Very excited about that. I was excited to serve and see what God was going to do with and through me. So I getting ready to go away to Lyft. It's Father's Day, which is always usually really hard on me. And it's a Saturday night. I'm leaving that following Tuesday, and I get a phone call at 12:30 at night saying, hey, just so you know, your mom got arrested. She was picked up for possessing chemicals to manufacture meth. And, like, that's something I never expected. I knew she had her problems, but that's a whole nother level. You know, that's the level of the people that were, you know, in and out of our house and stuff like that. So I didn't know how to take that, because that was a really big weight. I couldn't go to my hometown for those next couple of days. Could barely get on Facebook. She was all over the news because it was this big headline, you know, Akron librarian arrested for meth. You know, it was the Breaking Bad, the Walter White jokes, all that stuff. You know, I was so unbelievably embarrassed, but nonetheless, I went and I traveled with Lyft. And with Lyft, we like to call Wednesdays Spiritual Warfare Wednesdays. Wednesdays are usually the days that everybody's tired. Students, staff, pastors, everybody's kind of at that point where we're having fun, but we're really tired and whatever. So Wednesdays happen to be the day that every single week my mom was going to court for this meth thing. And she was calling me every Wednesday night and telling me how it went. So it was really hard for me to really grow the way that I could have potentially grown as, you know, traveling with Lyft, because I was very distracted by that. So coming back from that summer, I transferred schools. I transferred over to Kent State. I got a place of my own, and I was excited, but I was still holding on to a lot of the stuff that my mom put me through. I was still pretty angry. I still hadn't fully given it over to God. And I was hanging out with some people that, you know, we came to church together, and we were living in everybody else's eyes, we were living the right way, but on the side, we were going out and, making bad choices. So that's really what I surrounded my life with, was living on the fence, and living in a way that I knew I wasn't supposed to be living, but I was hiding it from everybody, and everybody thought it was cool because I was hanging out with church people. So there was a lot of negativity in that, a lot of just very unhealthy conversations and stuff like that, where I ended up getting to a point where I was feeling really, really low, and met a guy, and things got very, very bad between us. I really hated myself, and it was funny because, I'd gone to a Christian school for a year, I'd traveled on Lyft staff, in the eyes of the world, for what I'd been through, I was doing pretty good, but I really wasn't, because I was very selfish still. And, stuff with this guy got really, really bad. Like I said, there were some times where I made some bad choices, and I'll never be able to take that back. So, nonetheless, I applied for Lyft staff again, and I went into that summer holding on to the baggage that I had picked up at the beginning of the year, I guess, in some ways. I wasn't serving with the right heart. I was expecting God to just transform things, when I knew the character of God, and I knew that I had to, if I wanted to change my life, I had to put some effort and know that He was in control, and He was going to work through me if I let Him work in me. And I really wasn't ready for that. So that whole summer I was serving, but I wasn't doing it with the right heart. So I got back, and I started my junior year of college, and I hit a point, I guess I hit a wall in some ways, where I got into another pretty bad situation with this guy, and there was a lot of, I don't know what the right word would be, but I got into this situation, and I had never felt like less of a human being. I never hated myself more than I did at this time. And it wasn't until I was mid-October, I'm sitting in a hospital bed by myself. There were some complications, some stuff that I had to get checked into. And I'm sitting there, and I was texting Michelle and Val, and, I was kind of fighting with them back and forth, and with Jay and even Larry, about some of the choices I was making, because we all knew that I knew better. I remember sitting in this hospital bed, and really at that point, I was done. I was done trying. I was done trying to do life on my own. I was done trying to be God in a lot of ways. There were so many different things through the years that I had held on to myself. I thought that if I held on to this little thing, God can still work with that, but that's not the case. This was the moment that I completely gave all of myself to Him and decided, God, whatever you're going to do, wherever you want me to go, however you want me to live, I'm ready. I'm done trying to do this on my own. I've seen how awesome you are when I let you work, and I've seen how terrible I am when I try to let myself work. And that moment really was it. That was the turning point in my life. And I didn't realize it at the time. I didn't realize really how badly I had messed up. It was, I guess, that day when I understood why all this crap, that I was putting myself through, and I was putting the people I care about through. I understood that I was really selfish, and there was no winning in that. There was no good outcome. So going forward from this day, I wasn't sure what God was going to do. I wasn't sure where He was going to lead me. I wasn't completely sure of what I was going to do, because I had to fix some things. I had hurt a lot of people that I'd cared about, and I hated that. But I knew that because I was willing, that God could work, and I didn't know what that looked like, but I knew I was ready to go. So about a month later, for whatever reason, God gave me the opportunity to be a light, even though my light was still kind of dim. My best friend was going through some stuff at the time, some stuff where he was kind of in the same boat, in the sense of, God, I'm done doing things my way. I want what you want, and that's it. So we were able to kind of walk through that together. Whereas we were both coming from very different situations and stuff like that, we were both able to come to a starting point and say, God, go, whatever you want. And it was really going into 2016 that everything in my life started to come together. Not everything was good. And that year I lost my cousin, I lost my grandpa, my grandparents moved away, my mom moved to Alabama. There's a lot of change, but in a lot of ways I think that was some of that stuff that I had gone through that year was God showing me that if I'm willing to live my life for Him, that He's going to do some pretty cool stuff. 2016 was a year that I finally understood that it's okay that my parents weren't there for me. Had it not been for that, I wouldn't have Jay, I wouldn't have Val or Larry and Michelle or any of the leaders that have influenced me in Connect and in this church and in this, this room even. If my parents didn't do what they did, I wouldn't be here. If I hadn't made the mistakes that I have made in my past, I wouldn't be able to speak into the lives of students and friends and just people in general. I wouldn't be able to relate to that, and that's something to be excited about. To be hurt and to have hurt others, and to see that God can use that no matter how bad we've screwed up is a really humbling thing. I finally learned to love myself. I finally learned to accept the love from others. It probably wasn't until last year that I fully understood that, some of the people that had come into my life were there because they loved me, not because they were obligated to be there, not because it was their job as a youth leader or whatever it was. That God had put these specific people in my life to show me how big His love is for me, because I believe that God speaks to us through other believers. And I was able to see people that I looked up to be the hands and feet of Jesus when I was very unlovable and I didn't love myself. But through it all, I've been able to see that God is so good. Any of the choices I've made, any of the hurt that I've ever felt, any of the pain I've caused anybody, I'm sorry for it in a lot of ways, but I wouldn't change it for the world. I wouldn't be here today had it not been for some of the stuff that I'd gone through. I shouldn't be sitting here right now. I shouldn't be sharing my story with anyone. But through it all, God is good, and God is sovereign, and He's always gonna carry us through. So that's why I've chosen to live my life with God first. My name is Jordan Lacy, and I am second.